The empire was old, powerful, and feared across the stars. For centuries, its leaders ruled without challenge. Their armies crushed worlds, and their scientists shaped life itself. They believed no creature could resist their will. That belief would soon be tested. In a secret base, hidden deep under black mountains, the empire prepared its newest experiment. The goal was simple: take a human mind and erase it. Humans were seen as weak creatures, useful only as slaves or tools. But the empire wanted more. They wanted a perfect servant, a living weapon who would obey without question. For this, they had chosen one subject, a young human woman. She was taken in silence, pulled from her home without warning. When she woke, she found herself inside a cold metal chamber. The walls were smooth, the air smelled of chemicals, and the light above her flickered like dying stars. Strange machines surrounded her, glowing with alien energy. The scientists watched from behind glass. They were tall, with thin bodies and silver eyes that never blinked. To them, she was not a person. She was only a test, a tool. The leader of the lab raised a hand. His voice echoed through the room. "Begin the process." The machines came alive. Wires tightened around her arms and legs. A helmet with bright lights lowered onto her head. The woman tried to move, but her body was locked in place. At first, there was only silence. Then, the invasion began. The machines did not break her bones or tear her flesh. They attacked her mind. Waves of strange energy pushed into her thoughts, trying to burn away who she was. Her memories flashed before her eyes. Her family, her friends, the life she once had. The Empire wanted to erase them all. The scientists smiled. They had done this many times before. Most minds cracked within minutes. Some screamed. Others fell silent forever. No one had ever resisted, but this time, something was different. The woman's mind did not break. The harder the machines pushed, the more she pushed back. It was not anger that fueled her. It was something deeper, an unshakable will to survive. Inside her mind, she stood tall against the storm. Every time the machine tried to tear away a memory, she held it tighter. Every time the energy tried to crush her, she struck back with her own force. At first, the scientists thought it was an error. They adjusted the power, increasing the flow of energy. The lights grew brighter, and the machines hummed louder. Still, she resisted. Sweat rolled down her face, but her eyes burned with focus. She felt the pressure building, the Empire trying to take her soul, and then something shifted. Instead of only resisting, she began to reach outward. The machines had opened a door, one the scientists never expected. Through the energy, through the wires, she touched their minds. At first, it was only a spark, a faint connection. But with every second, the spark grew stronger. The scientists leaned closer, unaware of the danger. To them, the experiment was going well. The woman looked trapped. Her body was weak, her eyes closed. They thought victory was near, but inside, she was no longer the prisoner. She was exploring, searching, pushing into the very minds of her captors. She felt their thoughts like whispers. Their fears, their pride, their arrogance, it was all there open to her. The more they tried to break her, the deeper she sank into their consciousness. One scientist frowned, touching his head. "Strange," he muttered. "I feel dizzy." Another shook his head. "Ignore it. Focus on the test." But the whispers in their minds grew louder. They began to hear her voice. Soft at first, like a shadow in the corner of their thoughts. Then stronger, firmer, impossible to ignore. "You think I am your subject?" the voice whispered. "But I see you now." The scientists froze. None of them spoke, yet they all heard it. The woman's lips had not moved, but her words rang inside their heads. The leader of the lab scowled. "Increase the power," he ordered. The machines roared, filling the room with blinding light. But the result was not what they expected. The woman opened her eyes. They glowed faintly, brighter with each second. Her breathing was steady, calm, unbroken. The more they pushed, the stronger she became. And then, the first scientist obeyed her. Without warning, he reached for a control panel and shut down one of the machines. His hands moved as if they were not his own. The others shouted at him, but his face was blank, his eyes empty. The leader slammed his fist against the glass. "What are you doing?" The woman only stared at him, her gaze sharp as a blade. Inside his mind, he felt her presence, cold, powerful, watching. He tried to resist, but he could not move. His hands trembled. His heart raced. He wanted to shout, but no sound left his mouth. The scientists had believed they were breaking her. They were wrong. The experiment had failed. But in that failure, something greater had awakened. She was no longer a victim. She was inside their minds, and they could not stop her. And as the room fell silent, only one truth remained. The Empire had created not a servant, but a master. The Empire's scientists thought the experiment was finished. They looked at the young human woman strapped to their machine and saw what they wanted to see, a subject beaten into silence. Her eyes were calm, her body still. To them, this meant victory. But they did not understand the truth. The woman was not broken. She was awake, and she was inside their minds. The guards entered the chamber, their heavy boots echoing against the metal floor. Their armor shone under the harsh lights, and their weapons were ready. They had been told the human was dangerous before the experiment. But now, after the so-called success, they saw only a weak creature. One guard laughed. "So much for human willpower. She looks empty now." The woman lifted her head slowly. Her gaze brushed past him. She did not speak, but something invisible moved between them, like a thread connecting her mind to his. The guard blinked. His laugh faded. For a moment, he forgot what he was doing. His weapon lowered an inch, then another. His fellow guards frowned at him. "What are you doing?" One hissed. I don't know," he muttered, his voice hollow. His hand dropped the weapon. It clattered on the floor. The woman's lips curled into the smallest smile. The scientists noticed nothing. They were too busy celebrating their achievement, writing down numbers and praising their genius. They thought the human was just sitting there, waiting for orders, but the truth was far more dangerous. She was already giving orders. The next day, she was moved to a different cell. It was a simple room with steel walls, a single bed, and a camera in the corner. The guards escorted her in silence. As they locked the door, one of them glanced at her. For a heartbeat, his thoughts were not his own. He felt a command rise in his mind, quiet, sharp, undeniable. "Leave the door unlocked." His hand twitched. He hesitated. Then, without understanding why, he obeyed. He pressed the lock, but the mechanism did not seal. To anyone watching, it looked secure, but it wasn't. He walked away, his face pale. The woman sat on the bed, calm, her hands folded. She closed her eyes and reached further. Through walls, through metal, through the thin barriers of thought, her mind spread like ripples in water. She touched another guard in the hallway. A simple push, nothing more. His head tilted, confusion clouding his eyes. But then he straightened, acting normal again. She was learning, testing. Each time she pushed, she felt stronger. In the observation room, two scientists argued. "She shows no signs of memory," one said. "Her mind must be wiped clean," the other frowned. "Strange, though. Her vital signs are too stable. No panic, no fear." "It doesn't matter," the first replied. "She's ours now." They did not notice that one of their assistants stood silently in the corner, staring blankly at the wall. His mind was no longer his own. That night, the woman rose from her bed. She walked to the door and pushed it gently. It swung open without a sound. The hall outside was quiet, except for a single guard. He turned, surprised to see her free. His hand shot to his weapon, but then her eyes met his. The weapon stayed holstered. "Go back to your post," she whispered. He nodded slowly and stepped aside, as if it was the most natural command in the world. She walked past him, her bare feet soft against the cold floor. Cameras watched, but she tilted her head, and the guard at the surveillance station blinked in confusion. For the next 10 minutes, the screens showed nothing unusual. His mind told him everything was normal, but it was not. Deeper into the base, she found more guards. Each time, the same thing happened. A glance, a whisper, a thread pulling their will into her hands. Some resisted for a second. Most didn't resist at all. Their thoughts bent like metal under fire. By the time she reached the central hall, she was no longer alone. A small group of guards walked behind her, their faces blank, their movements stiff. To anyone else, it would look like they were escorting a prisoner. In truth, they were her silent army. At dawn, the Empire's leaders received a report. The experiment was a success. The human subject was obedient. The guards were calm. The scientists had full control. But none of it was true. The leaders did not know that their own soldiers were already under her influence. They did not know that the human woman who should have been broken was instead bending their empire to her will. And as she sat quietly in her cell once more, her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. The silent rebellion had begun. The Empire's leaders believed the human was under control. Reports came in from the hidden base. Subject shows no resistance. Obedience is complete. They trusted the scientists, never suspecting that the truth was already slipping out of their hands. The woman remained in her cell, quiet, her head lowered. But her silence was not defeat, it was patience. She had learned how to touch minds, how to bend thoughts without lifting a finger. Now she was ready to test her power. The door opened with a hiss. A scientist stepped inside with 2 guards. He carried a data pad filled with questions. "Stand up," he ordered coldly. The woman looked at him. For a moment she said nothing. Then slowly she rose. The guards kept their weapons aimed at her, their fingers tense. The scientist began his test. "What is your name?" he asked. She tilted her head. Her lips did not move, but her voice whispered directly into his thoughts. "What do you want me to be?" The scientist froze. His eyes widened. His data pad slipped from his hand, clattering onto the floor. The guards frowned. "Sir, is something wrong?" He swallowed, shaking his head quickly. No, it's fine, continue." But his hands trembled. Her voice had not come from the air. It had come from inside him. The woman lowered her gaze as if she were weak, but inside she was reaching further. Her mind slid past the scientist, brushing against one of the guards. She whispered only one word. "Step forward." The guard blinked. His boots moved without thought. The scientist turned, startled. "What are you doing?" "Stay back!" The guard's face was blank, his body stiff, but he obeyed her invisible command. The woman's eyes glowed faintly. She pushed again. "Unlock me!" The guard reached down. His hand trembled, but his fingers began releasing the restraints around her wrists. The scientist shouted, panicked, "Stop him! Stop now!" The second guard lifted his weapon, yet hesitated. His finger refused to pull the trigger. Something inside his mind whispered against his will, telling him to wait. And then, it happened. The final restraint snapped open. The woman stood free for the first time since her capture. The scientist stumbled back, his face pale. "This is impossible. She's controlling them." The woman turned to him slowly, her steps silent. Her voice entered his mind like a knife. "Give me the door." His legs moved before his brain could stop them. He staggered to the panel, his hand pressing the release. The door slid open with a metallic hiss. He gasped, horrified. No, I didn't mean to." Her eyes locked on him. He fell silent instantly, as if her stare had stolen the words from his throat. The hallway outside was busy. More guards stood on patrol, their armor gleaming. They looked up in surprise as the woman stepped into the light, but she did not run. She did not fight. Instead, she whispered into their thoughts, a quiet command spreading like smoke. "Stand aside." And they did, one by one. Soldiers who should have blocked her path instead moved aside, their eyes glazed. Some even bowed slightly without realizing it. Within minutes, she was walking through the heart of the base, surrounded by guards who now followed her like shadows. In the control room, alarms began to flash. One officer jumped from his seat. "Sir, the human subject is out of her cell." The commander on duty frowned. "What? That's not possible." "How many guards are with her?" The officer checked the feed. His face turned pale. "All of them. She's leading them." On the screen, they saw her walking calmly, dozens of armed soldiers marching behind her as though she were their general. The commander slammed his fist on the table. "This isn't a breakout. It's a takeover. The woman entered the council chamber at the center of the base. This was where high-ranking leaders gathered to oversee experiments. The doors opened with a heavy crash, and she walked in as if she owned the place. The leaders stared in shock. "How did she get here?" one demanded. Another snarled, "Guards, restrain her at once!" But the guards did not move. They stood silently behind her, weapons at their sides, eyes blank. The woman stepped forward. Her voice echoed in their minds, steady and cold. "Kneel!" The guards dropped to one knee in unison. The council chamber went silent. The leaders realized too late. Their experiment had not given them a servant. It had given their enemy the power to command their strongest soldiers with nothing more than a thought. The woman raised her hand slowly. Her eyes glowed brighter now. "From this moment," she whispered into every mind in the room, "you are mine." And for the first time, the rulers of the empire felt fear. The council chamber was silent. The leaders of the empire, creatures who had commanded galaxies, who had bent entire races to their will, now stared at the young human woman who stood before them. Her hands were free. Her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Behind her, guards stood like statues, their weapons lowered. Their minds no longer their own. For the first time in centuries, the rulers of the empire felt fear. The head counselor, a tall figure with silver skin and sharp black eyes, slammed his fist against the table. "This is an illusion," he growled. "The experiment cannot fail. She is nothing but a subject." He turned to the guards. "Seize her!" But the guards didn't move. Their faces were blank, their eyes fixed on her. The woman stepped forward, slow and calm, her footsteps echoing against the polished floor. "They are not yours anymore," her voice whispered, not through the air, but directly inside the minds of every counselor. The leaders shifted uncomfortably, their claws tightening on the table's edge. They were masters of thought manipulation, but this was different. Her voice carried weight. It bent their will before they could resist. The head counselor leaned forward, baring his teeth. "You may control soldiers, but you cannot control us. We are the Empire's mind. We are unbreakable." The woman tilted her head. She studied him with quiet eyes, as though he were a puzzle waiting to be solved. Then she spoke one word. "Kneel!" At first, nothing happened. The counselors resisted. Their minds were strong, trained for centuries to fight psychic pressure. But the pressure grew. It wrapped around them like chains, pulling harder and harder. Their thoughts struggled, but her will was heavier than their pride. One counselor gasped and dropped to one knee. His breath shook. Another followed, his eyes wide with terror. The head counselor clutched his head, his body trembling. He roared in defiance, but his legs betrayed him. Slowly, painfully, he sank to the floor. Within moments, the rulers of the empire, the so-called puppet masters of the galaxy, were kneeling before the very human they had tried to enslave. The woman stood above them, silent. She did not smile. She did not speak. She only watched as they bowed. Finally, her voice filled their minds again. "You wanted to erase me. Instead, you opened the door. You let me inside." Her eyes scanned each leader one by one. "From now on, your voices are mine. Your commands are mine. Your empire is mine." The counselors shuddered. None dared answer. In the observation chamber above, junior officers watched in horror. One of them whispered, She's controlling them. The council, our masters, they're bowing to her." Another officer shook his head, fear clouding his eyes. "If she can do this to them, what chance do we have?" The realization spread like poison through the base. Whispers traveled fast. "The human has broken the council." The council obeys her now. That night, the woman remained in the chamber. The leaders sat silently around her, their heads lowered, their minds bound by invisible chains. She tested her new power carefully. She spoke a command, and they obeyed. "Stand," they stood. "Sit." They sat. Their pride was gone, their resistance shattered. One counselor tried to resist again. He clenched his jaw and whispered, We will not serve you." Her eyes narrowed. For a moment, silence filled the chamber. Then she whispered back, her voice sharp as steel. You already do. The counselor's head dropped, sweat dripping down his silver skin. His will collapsed, and his mind fell into her grasp like all the others. The Empire had always ruled through fear. Now, their own fear was turned against them. The woman walked to the high throne at the center of the chamber. It was carved from dark stone, the seat of ultimate power. She sat down slowly, her back straight, her eyes glowing brighter than ever. The counselors remained kneeling before her. To anyone watching, it looked as if she had been their queen all along. Across the base, soldiers and workers noticed subtle changes. The guards no longer reported to their commanders. They reported only to her. Orders that once came from the council now came through her voice. And strangely, the Empire's machine continued to move smoothly. Fleets launched on schedule. Armies marched as usual. Nothing seemed broken. But everything had changed. The woman was the hand pulling the strings. The council was no longer the Empire's brain. They were its puppets. Whispers spread beyond the base, carried by soldiers and servants who felt the change but could not explain it. The council had grown quieter, more obedient. Their words carried a strange weight, as though someone else spoke through them. Some suspected. None dared speak aloud. Because if the rulers themselves could be controlled, then who in the galaxy was safe? And so, the silent transformation of the Empire began. The puppet masters had become puppets, and their new master, the human they had tried to erase, was only beginning her reign. The Empire looked unchanged from the outside. Its fleets still patrolled the stars. Its armies still marched across distant worlds. Its leaders still sat in their grand halls giving orders with cold voices. But the truth was very different. Those orders no longer came from the council. They came from her. The young human woman who had once been their prisoner now sat in the shadows of the Empire's throne room. She did not wear a crown, and she did not sit in the public eye. To the galaxy, she was invisible. But behind every command, every decision, every move, her hand pulled the strings. The council spoke with her words. Generals carried out her will. Soldiers marched as if she were their true commander. It was not an empire anymore. It was her hidden kingdom. At first, no one noticed. To the outside races, the empire looked strong as always. The fleets flew in perfect lines. The council's speeches were calm, their orders steady. There was no chaos, no weakness. But there was something strange. The council no longer argued with each other. For centuries, they had been known for pride and endless fights over power. Now they agreed too easily. Their voices sounded the same. Whispers began in the outer colonies. Something is wrong. The council speaks like one mind. Maybe they are no longer themselves, but no one dared investigate. The empire was still terrifying, and fear kept other species silent. The woman tested her power carefully. She gave small orders at first, changing patrol routes, moving soldiers to new positions, shifting resources. Every time, the council obeyed. Her influence spread like roots through soil, slow, silent, unstoppable. Soon, entire fleets answered only to her. Generals who once bowed to the council now felt their minds bend under her command. Admirals who believed themselves untouchable found their thoughts no longer free. The galaxy thought the empire was steady. In truth, it was being rewired from within, but not everyone was blind. A group of rebels from a distant world noticed the changes. They had fought the empire for years, surviving in the shadows. When the council grew strangely silent, they grew suspicious. One rebel spy whispered, "This is our chance. The empire has grown weak. Their leaders hesitate. We can strike now." They prepared fleets. They spread messages through secret channels. Planets long crushed by the empire began to stir, but the rebels did not know the truth. They thought they were fighting the old empire. They did not understand that the woman was waiting for them. Back in the empire's capital, she sat in her private chamber. The air was quiet, the lights dim. She closed her eyes and reached out. Her mind stretched beyond walls, beyond worlds, beyond the distance of stars. She touched the council, pulling their thoughts tighter. She touched generals on faraway battlefields, whispering orders directly into their minds. She touched guards in the streets, guiding their steps without them knowing why. Every day her control grew stronger. Every night she reminded herself of the truth. She had been their prisoner. They had tried to erase her, to break her, to use her. Now she was turning their empire into her weapon. But there was danger too. The longer she controlled them, the more strain pressed on her mind. She felt thousands of voices pulling against her at once. Sometimes, late at night, her head pounded with their whispers. The council tried to resist in dreams. Generals tried to fight in silence, and yet none of them could break free. Her will was sharper, stronger, hungrier. One evening, a loyal servant brought her news. "My lady, the rebels have risen. They gather fleets. They march on our borders." The woman opened her eyes. Her glow cut through the dim chamber. "Good," she whispered. The servant frowned. "Good, but they are dangerous. They could—" Her voice slid into his mind like a blade. "They will come. They will fight. And they will kneel." The servant bowed his head, trembling. He could not argue. Far away, the rebels prepared to strike. They believed the empire was crumbling. They believed victory was close, but the woman was already watching them. Her silent war had begun. The galaxy thought it was facing the empire. But soon it would learn the truth. It was facing her, and she was not merciful. The galaxy had grown restless. For too long, the empire had ruled with an iron grip, crushing anyone who dared to rise. But now, something felt different. Whispers spread across the stars. The council no longer argued. Their voices sounded strange, their orders too perfect. Fleets moved like shadows, silent and precise. Worlds under their control felt a cold presence in every command. The rebels saw this as weakness. On a hidden moon, far beyond the empire's borders, rebel leaders gathered inside a dark war room. The air smelled of smoke and metal. Maps of star systems glowed on the table. One rebel commander slammed his fist against the surface. "This is our chance!" "The empire hesitates. Their council is broken. If we strike now, we can end them." Another frowned, his voice cautious. "Or it could be a trap. Something feels wrong. Their power has not faded. It has changed." The room grew tense. Every rebel there had lost family, friends, and homes to the empire. Rage burned in their hearts. Finally, the rebel leader spoke. His voice was sharp. "We strike. No more waiting. The galaxy will follow us once they see the empire bleed." And so, the rebellion began to awaken. Fleets rose from hidden bases. Ships long buried in deserts and ice plains took to the skies. Pilots trained in secret caves now flew under banners of fire and vengeance. They believed the empire was weak. They believed victory was near, but they did not know the truth. Back in the empire's capital, the woman sat in silence. Her chamber was dark, her eyes glowing faintly as she listened to the thoughts of the council. They spoke with her words, spreading orders across the stars. She already knew about the rebellion. She had felt their whispers long before her spies reported them. The moment the rebels gathered, their fear and anger had brushed against her mind. Now, she closed her eyes and reached further. She felt the rebellion's leaders planning, their ships fueling, their soldiers preparing for war. She could hear their hopes, their anger, their belief that the empire was falling, and she smiled. The counselors stood before her, their heads bowed. Once they had been feared as the empire's masters. Now they were her hollow voices. "Shall we crush them at once?" one asked, his voice trembling under her gaze. "No," she said softly. Her voice spread into their minds like smoke. "Let them come. Let them believe they are strong. Their hope will bring them to me." The counselors obeyed without question. Weeks later, the rebellion struck. Across the borders of the empire, battles ignited. Rebel fleets fell upon patrol ships, destroying them with sudden fire. Colonies declared freedom, raising rebel flags. Soldiers shouted victory cries as they pushed deeper into enemy space. The galaxy cheered. For the first time in centuries, it looked as if the empire was losing ground. But it was not losing. It was waiting. On one captured world, rebels stood in the streets celebrating. Their leader raised his hand and shouted, "The empire has fallen here! Soon it will fall everywhere!" The crowd roared. Hope filled the air. But that night, the stars above the world darkened. An Imperial fleet arrived, larger than anything the rebels had expected. Ships filled the sky, blocking out the moons. The rebel soldiers rushed to defend, but something was wrong. Their generals froze in their ships, their voices silent. Orders turned to confusion. Pilots disobeyed without knowing why, and then they heard it. A voice. Not from speakers. Not from radios. A voice inside their minds. You thought I was weak. You thought I was broken. But you fight not the Empire? You fight me. On the ground, rebels dropped their weapons as the voice filled their heads. Some tried to resist. Most could not. Their hands shook. Their hearts raced. Their loyalty wavered. Within hours, the rebellion's great strike became a slaughter. Entire fleets turned their weapons on each other. Commanders betrayed their own soldiers without understanding why. The rebels thought they were fighting the Empire, but they were already under her shadow. Back in her chamber, the woman opened her eyes. She saw everything, the battles, the fear, the surrender. She did not need to travel. The rebellion was crushed under the weight of her will. The counselors bowed lower than ever before. Your command is law, one whispered. She looked at him, her gaze cold. It always was. And so the galaxy learned a terrible truth. The rebellion had not awakened. It had only awakened her. The galaxy burned. The rebellion was broken but not destroyed. Scattered fleets hid in the dark edges of space. Their leaders whispered in fear, knowing the Empire was no longer what it seemed. Something else, someone else, was pulling the strings. They had seen their armies betray them without reason. They had heard the voice in their minds. Some called it a weapon, some called it a curse, but the truth spread in quiet terror. It was not the Empire they fought, it was her. On a hidden station near a dying star, the last rebel commanders gathered. Faces pale, voices sharp, one slammed his hand on the table. We cannot keep running. Every world we take, she takes back in a single night. Every fleet we build, she turns against us. If we don't face her now, there will be nothing left to save. Another shook his head. You don't understand. She is not just a leader. She is inside us. Inside our thoughts. How do you fight someone already in your mind? Silence fell. The rebels looked at each other, their fear heavy in the air. Finally, the highest commander stood. His voice was hard, but his hands trembled. We fight with everything we have left. One last strike. One final battle. If we die free. And so the plan was made. The rebels would gather their entire fleet, every ship that remained. They would strike at the Empire's capital, the heart of her power. Days later, the galaxy shook. From hidden systems and broken colonies, the last rebel ships emerged. Thousands of vessels gathered, black shapes against the stars. Engines roared. Weapons armed. Soldiers cheered even through their fear. This is our chance, their leaders cried. We fight not for victory, but for freedom. The fleet moved forward, cutting through the void like a blade of fire. In the capital world, she waited. She stood at the highest tower, her eyes glowing faintly, her face calm. Around her, the Empire's council knelt in silence. Their voices were gone. They were only her shadows now. Through the great windows, she watched the sky. She did not need sensors or warnings. She could already feel them, the rebels burning with anger and hope as they approached. They come, one counselor whispered. Yes, she answered softly. Let them. The rebel fleet broke into the capital system. Gas giants, moons, and stations lit up with the sudden arrival. The rebels formed into lines, massive ships spreading across the stars. The capital world glowed ahead, a jewel surrounded by endless imperial defenses. But the defenses did not move. The fleet stayed still, waiting. It was too quiet, too calm. The rebel commanders felt it. Fear crawled into their hearts. Something is wrong, one muttered, and then she appeared. Not in person. Not on screens, in their minds. A voice spread through every ship, every soldier, every pilot. Smooth, cold, unstoppable. You came here to end me. But you were mine the moment you chose to fight. Panic spread across the rebel fleet. Soldiers clutched their heads. Commanders shouted orders, but half the crews no longer obeyed. Ships began to turn, facing not the Empire, but each other. Weapons charged. The rebellion's last hope crumbled before the battle even began. In one flagship, the highest commander fought against the voice. He gritted his teeth, forcing his mind to resist. "No! We are free! We fight for the galaxy!" But her laughter echoed inside his skull. "You fight for me. You always did. Every ship, every soldier, every breath of your war has led you here, to kneel." And with that, his hands moved against his will. He gave the command to fire on his own fleet. Chaos erupted. Rebel ships blasted each other apart. Explosions lit the sky. Soldiers screamed as their own weapons turned against them. The Empire's fleets finally moved, sweeping in like shadows. But they did not fire at random. They followed her will perfectly, striking only where resistance still stood. Within hours, the great rebel fleet, the last hope of freedom, was nothing but burning wreckage. In the tower, she closed her eyes and breathed slowly. She had felt it all. The fear, the surrender, the silence after. The council bowed lower. "It is done, my queen," one whispered. She looked at him, her voice calm but heavy with power. "No, it is only beginning." For the first time, the galaxy understood the truth. The rebellion had not fought the Empire. They had fought a single human, one they had once thought weak, and now no fleet remained to challenge her. She did not just command an empire. She commanded the galaxy itself. The galaxy was silent. The last rebel fleet had burned, their ships floating as ruins among the stars. No victory cries, no more battle horns, only fire, drifting bodies, and the cold silence of defeat. Worlds across the galaxy watched in fear. They had prayed the rebellion would win, prayed for freedom. Instead, they saw something far worse, an empire not broken but reborn, ruled by something beyond their understanding, and at the center of it all stood her. Inside the Empire's great tower, she walked through the council chamber. The walls once echoed with arguments, with the proud voices of alien leaders. Now there was only silence. The counselors knelt in rows, their faces pale, their eyes empty. They no longer spoke unless she willed it. Their power was gone, their pride erased. She moved past them like a shadow, her steps calm, her gaze cold. At the head of the chamber, she stopped. A giant window showed the capital city below. Millions of lights, millions of lives. All of them hers. She closed her eyes, and with a single thought she felt them, the workers in the streets, the soldiers in their barracks, the generals on distant warships, every voice, every mind, every soul, all of them waited for her command. In distant systems, whispers spread. Aliens told each other stories in frightened tones. "Did you hear? The council is gone. She speaks for them now. They say she can look into your mind, even from across the stars. Some call her a savior. Others call her the end." No one dared to rise. No one dared to resist, because resistance was no longer possible. She had become something new, not a queen crowned by ceremony, not an emperor raised by bloodline. She was a ruler carved from fear, a sovereign who did not need thrones or armies. She commanded with silence, with whispers inside the mind. Even the strongest warlords, the cruelest governors, the proudest kings of other worlds, all bowed when her shadow touched them. One night, she walked alone through the gardens of the tower. The air smelled of strange alien flowers glowing under the moons. She looked up at the stars, her face unreadable. Once she had been a prisoner. Once she had been nothing but a subject in a cruel experiment. Now, she was the one writing the experiment. The galaxy was her lab. The leaders were her tools. The people were her subjects. She whispered softly into the night, words only the stars could hear. "They wanted to erase me. Instead, I erased them." But deep inside, a question lingered. Had she truly won her freedom? Or had she become the very monster they tried to create? Her power grew stronger with every passing day. The more minds she touched, the more her own thoughts became tangled with theirs. She no longer knew where her will ended and theirs began. Sometimes in the quiet of night she wondered, was she still herself? Or was she now something else entirely? The galaxy feared her, but they also depended on her. Pirates stopped their raids. Warlords ended their battles. Planets once torn apart by greed now fell into perfect order because no one dared to disobey. Peace spread across the stars, but it was not the peace of freedom. It was the peace of chains. Every smile, every cheer, every prayer whispered in the dark. All of it was for her. In the end, she stood before the council chamber one last time. The counselors knelt, silent as ever. Her eyes glowed faintly as she raised her hand. "You are no longer leaders," she said softly. "You are vessels. The galaxy needs only one voice now." And with a single thought, their minds dissolved into her own. She did not just control them anymore. She was them. The galaxy would remember this moment forever, not as the day the rebellion ended. Not as the day the Empire won, but as the day a single human, once weak, once broken, became the mind of the galaxy. From then on, she was known by many names: the Whispering Queen, the Silent Empress, the Queen of Minds, and across every world, in every tongue, one truth spread like fire. The experiment had not only backfired, it had created a ruler the stars would never escape.